This is working.
Should we let everybody sit down, or should I tell them? We're about ready to get started. If we could all take our seats, thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Senator Bill Dodd. I'm just delighted to be here tonight, and thank you all for coming. Transportation is always one of the top issues I hear from our communities. Before I was in the legislature, I was 14 years on the Napa County Transportation Planning Agency and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, so it's close to my heart as well, whether it's road conditions, traffic, transit options, multimodal infrastructure for biking and walking. It's often the top of mind when people think about government services. That's why I pulled together these experts from local, regional, and state agencies so you can get the latest. Just as important, after the panelists have all spoken, we'll have question and answer time. And I look forward to hearing from you. That's one of the most valuable parts of holding these forums. As many of you know, the state spent many years without significantly increasing investments in roads until we passed SB 1 last year, which provides an additional $5 billion per year in roads funding. Deferred maintenance is essentially a massive unfunded liability placed on future generations, so this action was desperately needed. If left unfixed, the cost of those repairs goes up exponentially. The money from SB 1 is split between state highway project and local street and road maintenance. And in June, the voters overwhelmingly passed a constitutional amendment to ensure that no future governor or legislature can divert that money for any other purposes. That was critical to me supporting SB 1 in the first place. We've seen that before, where we've had funding that's scheduled to be for one item, and the economy gets tough and it's needed in other areas. This gas tax will always stay in road and street repairs, and I think that's great. I also think as a self-help county, meaning a county where voters pass a dedicated funding source, Napa County and its cities is poised to capture a significant share of funding relative to our population and road miles. We're still at the front end of projects getting completed with this funding, but we're going to be seeing more and more all the time. Traffic safety is also very important to me, and this year I authored a bill, SB 973, to boost our state's designated driver program and ride sharing, as well as the resolution naming Child Passenger Safety Week. We know that restraints are improperly used in many instances. CHP can help install and advise on safety seat installations. Again, thank you to everyone for coming here tonight. We do have some goodies over here on the right if you need a little sugar. Again, thank you. Let's get started with our first panelist, Councilmember Mark Joseph.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the fact that everyone's here, and I will try to be brief. I'm here to talk a little bit about the transportation strategy in American Canyon, maybe how we can go about funding it, and some other logistical issues. And then a quick shout out to carpooling, although Kate Miller will go into more detail on that. So back in 1994, when the city first adopted its general plan and circulation element, their strategy for dealing with circulation was a simple one, that in addition to Highway 29 that cut through the city, we would develop two parallel roads, one on the west being the Devlin Commerce alignment, and one on the east being, at the time, Flosden and South Kelly. It's now become Newell, but same alignment. And that was the strategy. And some people have said, well, we've heard about this for years, which is true because it was part of the general plan some 25 years ago. And in 2013, we modified it slightly to say, oh, by the way, Highway 29 shouldn't be a 4-lane, it ought to be a 6-lane, all to accommodate that traffic. And along with those parallel roads would be crossroads at South Kelly Road, for example, at Green Island, at Napa Junction, Rio, Donaldson, and so forth. So that the end effect is you would have a basic grid network that would give you capacity, but also flexibility in the event of, say, a traffic signal going out 2 or 3 times in a month, I think was our record last year. So that was the strategy. It makes a lot of sense, and the real issue is how do you execute it? And that usually involves 2 big headaches. One is finding the money, and the other is securing the right-of-way. And over the years, our strategy in the beginning was try to get funding. Back in 2005, 2006, we tried to get a funding measure that wasn't approved by the voters, but that would have been a major milestone because it would have provided the local funding. And Bill may remember, because I was the city manager, he was the supervisor, and that was one of our big projects. We got close, but no cigar. So that sets the stage for the other way of funding projects like this, and that is through the development process. And by property owners saying, I want to develop my property, and the city says, fine, and here are the conditions, one of which is usually give us right-of-way and build your fair share of it. And that's pretty much the strategy behind building the Devlin Road. And it works reasonably well. You get the development and all the benefits that come from that, which is in the industrial area, jobs and opportunities, but you also get that road built out without taxing the residents. The downside, of course, is it's based on development. So Devlin has taken quite a few years to get built, but the good news is we are very close to finishing it up. We're down to 2 segments, one in the county, one in the city. The city's project is in the design phase right now, and we hope to go out for construction next year, and that project may take a year and a half to complete. That'll at least get you an alignment from Napa, or the corporate park, I think, in Napa, South Napa, all the way down to American Canyon on Green Island Road. So that's the Devlin side of the equation. Newell is a little more of a, well, not a challenge, but it started a little later. Devlin we've been working on for years. Newell we've just started. And again, the same process is we have a development opportunity, Watson Ranch. And one of the conditions is that the developer will build some 2/3 of that road as part of his project. We have another property owner that wants to get brought into the city, and he will be conditioned most likely to develop a portion of the road. And strategically, we're hoping, thanks to SB1, that might be a pot of money we can work on to secure a grant that would fund the balance. And that's the basic funding strategy we've been using to try to develop this circulation element that in turn provides the capacity and the flexibility that we're looking for. None of this is easy, I want to emphasize. And it takes a long time because you've got to secure the funding. As Senator Dodd just mentioned, up until a couple of years ago, there was something like a $10 billion a year gap in what we needed and what we had. And even SB1 didn't fill the gap, it just made a good dent in it to the tune of $5 or $6 billion a year. So money is a challenge. Getting right away from the property owners, unless they want to do a development, then you can get it much easier. But when they're not in the mood to sell or develop, it becomes a challenge. And all of that adds to delay, not to mention environmental challenges and regulatory challenges and so on. So my real point is there is a strategy, we're executing it, it will take time, it will involve approving some development to facilitate those improvements, but there is a game plan that is being executed. The last thing I want to say before I go is carpooling is a great alternative. I don't want to make light of that too much, but I do want to emphasize there are real advantages. You can get in the HOV lane if you're a carpooler. You can get breaks on bridge tolls, and it actually saves the air and everything else. So it really is a benefit, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because I believe Kate and I discussed it, and she'll highlight it more than me. So that's my point in a nutshell. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and look forward to your questions in about a half hour.
Before we go on to the next speaker, I'd like to introduce Mayor Garcia and thank him for being here tonight. Also, we have Council Member Oro somewhere there he is. And we also have Marianne Mancuso, the representative in this area for the Napa Valley College Board of Trustees. And we also have Barry Christensen from the Napa Parks and Open Space District. I hope I haven't left anybody out, but welcome and thank you for being here. So this time, I'm going to call on Jason Hawley, City Manager right here in the city of American Canyon.
Thanks, Bill. And thank you all for joining us here this evening in American Canyon. I'm going to talk a little bit about more boots on the ground kinds of projects that we're doing here in American Canyon in our neighborhoods, particularly around the streets and the plans we have for rehabilitating some of our local roads. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the partnerships we have with other agencies and how those relationships work. I'm proud to say I was actually out in the field today looking at a contractor working on some paving in the southwest part of town. Darren Taylor Construction is a contractor the city hired, about $400,000 worth of paving work happening on some local streets out by Knightsbridge and some other places in the southwest part of town. It's been many years since those streets had any work. So the project's completed, or going to be completed in the next couple of weeks. About 7 of the 10 streets are done as of tonight. That's the project this fall, but we have another one lined up for next spring. And again, these are funded with monies that the senator talked about, both Measure T, which is the local sales tax, the self-help county that Napa County is, and SB1, the money that was approved, the additional gas tax money for those roads. So the project that's underway right now is literally funded with SB1 dollars, and the project next spring will be funded with a combination of Measure T and SB1 dollars. We think it'll be about $1.5 million worth of construction, or 3 times as big that we're going to do next spring. And the priority or the focus area that American Canyon is focusing on our streets is to first identify the utilities that are below the ground. Some of those utilities are also in need of upgrade. And so we're holding off on streets that have utility work. We're focusing energy on getting those utilities done, and then we're focusing on streets to come back over the top. We don't want to go and pave a street and then have to dig it up to replace a pipeline. So we've done a fairly exhaustive effort of identifying those utilities, and we're out throughout town fixing pipelines. In fact, there's a sewer replacement project on the side of the highway that's under construction right now as well. So we're looking at those utilities, getting them fixed first, and then coming back with streets. And it's been, you can imagine, a little bit of a challenge to explain to our residents who may have a street that's in really bad repair and they're wondering what's taking so long to get it fixed. And oftentimes those streets may have a pipeline that we got to get to first. So it's definitely a balancing act. But the council adopted a 5-year plan last spring that identified the next 5 years worth of projects. And again, with the utility projects coming ahead of time. So those are very exciting, and we're hopeful that next spring we can do an even larger project. Another exciting project that we have underway here in American Canyon is on Donaldson Way. We have one middle school in town on the west side of the highway, and there was a gap between that middle school and our eastern side of the highway. And so students were walking literally in the road on Donaldson Way, and we've been able to, through our partnerships with Napa Valley Transportation and others in the region, obtain some grant funding for a new sidewalk project. And that project has been underway for a couple of weeks, and it will provide a new 8-foot wide sidewalk for those students and any pedestrians to walk and not have to be walking in the road. And that will complete a gap in the segment that existed between the west side and the east side. So it was a long sought after priority. It was a challenging project that we actually designed with city staff, but I'm proud to say our internal engineers came up with the design. It was somewhat of a tricky one, but very proud of that work to be underway. We expect first part of next year that it'll be wrapped up. Speaking kind of about the partnerships, the city works with the Napa Valley Transportation and MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and others, and Caltrans and others, mostly on funding, but also on design help and project identification, trying to understand the different projects that are needed, the funding sources that are available, the different all manner of grant funding or project funding sources. And so we work and coexist with those groups and try and work together on projects to get them done for our residents. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tony Tavares, Caltrans District 4.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Senator Dodd, for organizing tonight's town hall discussion. I appreciate it. I appreciate seeing such a nice turnout in the audience as well, and I look forward to the questions later this evening. So California state system, highway system, serves a $2.2 trillion economy, an economy that's now 5th largest in the nation, or in the world, I should say. California's current population is expected to grow from 38 million to 50 million in the next 20 to 30 years. American Canyon is a great example of growth occurring throughout the state. and how do we continue to support this growth in the population and the growth in our economy. So I'd like to share with you this evening our three focus areas that what Caltrans is doing to change the way we do business, to be a better partner, be more transparent, and be able to communicate how we're moving forward. Number one, safety. Safety is our number one priority. Employee safety and safety for the traveling public, and that means vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians as well. We've embraced a Towards Zero Death, or Vision Zero campaign for California, and we're committed to that campaign. We need to bring our transportation infrastructure into the 21st century by delivering projects that will enhance safety for the traveling public, while also delivering features that improve safety for the public, while also minimizing the exposure of our maintenance employees to live traffic. We're currently partnering with other governmental agencies such as the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, American Canyon, the city, and others, as well as industry experts to incorporate technology and innovation into our transportation solutions. One of the projects we're working here on Highway 29 through American Canyon is we're looking to improve the traffic signals along this route. There's 5 of them. We're going to allow for proactive remote monitoring and adjustments of the signal timing by our Caltrans operations staff in Oakland, so they'll be able to monitor when congestion starts increasing and be able to adjust the timing of the signals. Most importantly, we want to communicate and coordinate with all of you in the community to ensure we're delivering the right solutions for everyone. Our second focus area is Senate Bill 1. You've heard it from Senator Dodd, and I'd like to just talk a little bit more about that. Prior to the passage of Senate Bill 1, California state highways and local roads were facing an estimated $137 billion deferred maintenance backlog over the next 10 years. Senate Bill 1, the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017, is going to provide $54 billion over the next 10 years, split between the state and the local agencies. So that it's not just Caltrans receiving the money, but your cities and your county is also going to receive half of that money. Senate Bill 1 will double the number of construction projects for both Caltrans and your local agency partners. What Senate Bill 1 has done for Caltrans is it actually established various performance metrics to achieve over the next decade. Caltrans is required over the next 10 years to have 98% of all of our pavement statewide to be in good or fair condition. We are committed to address over 17,000 lane miles of pavement between now and 10 years from now. We're committed also, Senate Bill 1 is requiring us to fix an additional 500 bridges throughout the state. Many of them here in the Bay Area will be either rehabilitated or replaced. 90% of our drainage systems, which are the culverts, the pipes that run underneath your roadways, have to be in good or fair condition. So we're committed to rehabilitating 55,000 culverts over the next 10 years. And I mentioned some of the traffic signals. We have a goal also of 90% of all of our traffic management system elements, which include those traffic signals and loop detectors and ramp meterings, to repair over 7,700 of those over the next 10 years. Senate Bill 1 also requires Caltrans to be more efficient. We are required to find $100 million of efficiencies every single year and invest that $100 million back into projects in your communities. I'm pleased to say this year we are reporting to the CTC, which is the California Transportation Commission, this week. We have found $130 million that are being reinvested back into the roadways here in the Bay Area and throughout the state. Senate Bill 1 has also established an auditor, which is called the Inspector General, which will be going through our books and ensuring that we have spent the dollars wisely, that we are spending every penny according to the law. I'd like to say that I'm very pleased to see that we have an Inspector General that is doing that. I like the accountability. I like being transparent. I like being able to report on the fact that we're doing the right thing, and this Inspector General will ensure that Caltrans continues to do the right thing. Our third area that we want to focus on is partnerships. Transportation projects are no longer delivered solely by Caltrans. I know that may be a rumor that folks may think that Caltrans deliver all the projects on the highways. That's no longer the case. We actually have to partner with the Napa Valley Transportation Authority and with cities such as American Canyon and others in order to deliver these projects. It literally takes a village to deliver a transportation project now in California. And we understand the valueship of these partnerships that we've established over the years. We're committed to enhancing our partnerships with our local agencies, the federal agencies, other state agencies, industry partners, but most importantly, we want to hear from the community because you're the ones who live here, you're the ones who use the transportation system, so we want to ensure that we deliver projects that meet your needs. I'm committed also to a renewed focus on customer service, providing communication and transparency in all of our processes, projects, and services that we provide to everyone is critical to ensure that we continue to earn your trust and confidence moving forward. So how are we going to change the business? We've actually put some things into place to change the way we do business. Caltrans implemented what's called an asset management plan. We developed a comprehensive state highway system management plan, which incorporates all of our inventory of our assets and the condition of those assets. Primarily the big four assets, which are pavement, bridges, drainage systems, and traffic management system elements. It's very much in line with what Senate Bill 1 has established. Performance targets have been reached or established for each one of those assets. And Caltrans is comprised of 12 districts. We performed a gap analysis for each one of those districts to determine where the gaps are. We determine the needs in each district, set performance metrics for each district based on the asset condition and inventory, and allocated funding according to the district performance metrics. When we determine that, we roll that all up into a statewide plan, which is the State Highway System Management Plan, and that can be located on our website, the Caltrans website, if you're ever interested. That plan has every single project we plan to deliver over the next 10 years in there. And why is this different, you may ask? This now allows each district to truly collaborate with its transportation partners. We no longer deliver siloed projects, such as pavement or bridge-only projects. We combine multiple assets into one project to benefit the economy of scale. It incentivizes each one of our Caltrans districts to truly partner with their local partners to deliver a project that addresses multiple transportation needs. Districts and local agencies can leverage funding from each other to deliver projects that previously we could not deliver by ourselves. Now here's the big change in the way we do business. Any cost savings that all of us here today working collaboratively, when we realize any of those cost savings, we get to keep those cost savings here in the Bay Area and reinvest them into additional transportation projects right here. That didn't happen before. The money used to go back to Sacramento. It stays here in the Bay Area. So that's a great thing right there. This allows Caltrans to act more like a business and imparts an entrepreneurial spirit when delivering transportation projects. With that, again, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. I look forward to any questions you may have later. And now I'd like to introduce Kate Miller, the Executive Director of the Napa Valley Transportation
You
Authority.
want me to go?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's actually Belia.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Belia.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you, Director. And thank you for being here. My name is Belia Ramos, and I have the pleasure of being your county supervisor, representing all of American Canyon and the southeast portion of Napa County. And prior to that, hopefully you know, I was your council member sitting in this very seat, and I'm feeling a little bit of PTSD right now from that odd seating arrangement here. I am the county's representative to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. I am also the county's representative to the Highway 37 committee that I'll speak about. And I am also the county's representative to the Association of Bay Area Governments, which is our council of governments. And there I serve not only on the executive board, but also on the administration committee and on the legislative committee. So in a nutshell, what does that mean? It means I get to talk a lot about the nexus of housing and transportation and mostly on Thursdays and Fridays. That requires me to drive through high commute hours to San Francisco, having just come from Napa, having driven our own commute. So I'll tell you a little bit about me so you can understand that I know where you're coming from and why there's such a great turnout. It's a pleasure to see so many people here. I am a permanent carpooler. I take my kids to school in Napa with me so that we can actually spend more time together. And I work at the county building on 3rd Street, and the children are with me. And yeah, I know exactly what you go through. I know how long it takes to get on the highway. I live on the west side of town. And this morning, Mr. Holly, it was 47 minutes for 14.2 miles. And Mr. Holly, because we see each other at drop-off in Napa, you will, Mr. Tavares, you will appreciate. I tell him when the signals are failing so he can give you a call. You've heard a lot about SB1. So you've heard the global component of SB1. That's Senate Bill 1. I'm going to tell you what it means for us locally. Locally, it means we are doubling the amount of money we have at the county available for roads maintenance for our local streets, for our county streets, for our local streets. So when you think about how much we have to do at the county, we have just shy of 500 miles that we're responsible for at the county. To have this influx of money, in addition to our Measure T funds that Director Miller will speak of, our Executive Director of NVTA, Kate Miller, will speak about, it's a significant commitment by this community to reinvest into our roads that have not been repaired. In addition, SB1 is also going to bring transit operations and capital program money. That's money that can be used, say, on the Vine Trail for the commitment of the maintenance of the Vine Trail itself being able to keep pedestrians and cyclists safe and away from the motor vehicle traffic itself. And just shout out to the Vine Trail. I know Philip Sales is here, right? One of the things, Philip Sales, Executive Director of the Vine Trail, one of the things about the Vine Trail itself is to be able to have that dedicated safe space for our cyclists as part of our entire county multimodal plan here in Napa County. And to have this SB1 money that will help us maintain that is going to further the sustainability of those types of multimodal programs. Have you driven through Saskell Junction? You know exactly where that is, right? There's it's a functional stoplight, but all it does is to serve to create a backup that lasts miles and takes at least 20 minutes to get through in the morning. SB1 and RM3, Regional Measure 3, that was just voted upon by the voters in June, is going to provide us the money that we need to recreate a better, more functional plan for Saskell Junction. And do we have these out there, Kate?
Yeah.
We have these flyers. Here you could see the two concepts that are proposed. The idea really is to keep people moving, right? It's better to keep moving even if it's at a slower pace than to be stopped, to move fast and then to stop. So one of the things that that we're focusing on here locally is being able to bring in those SB1 dollars, couple them with those RM3 dollars and other programmatic dollars that will allow us to complete a project that is of significant value to all of us, not just American Canyon, not just the county, not just the city of Napa. This is that intersection that transports the workforce up into the valley, and it is vital for us to be able to have this type of level of funding to commit to that program. Highway 37, does anyone commute on Highway 37? I'm so sorry. I'll just start there. I'll start with I'm so sorry because I came back from the Mill Valley Film Festival on Saturday. I left Corte Madera at 5. I left at 5:20. I was destined for the Oro's house for dinner. Pizza was waiting, and I ended up getting cold pizza because it took us an hour and 35 minutes on a Saturday afternoon. Why is that? There's a couple of things. One, the road conditions certainly do need improvements. We've had significant deterioration on the Highway 37 corridor itself, but really it was a connector and not designed to be this main thoroughfare that now connects these 4 counties. So the 4 counties, together with Caltrans, with MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, taking the lead, 4 counties are at the table talking about how we're going to fix this, and those counties are Marin, Sonoma, Napa, and Solano. So you might ask, well, why Napa? It doesn't touch us, right? Well, guess what? When it fails, every car goes through Napa, right? We've experienced that with the closures of Highway 37, with the subsidence of that roadway, with the flooding of that roadway. We're the ones impacted. So making sure that we're at the table, and you better know I'm pretty loud. I talk about diversion dollars all the time at that committee. Kate can vouch for me that I say we need to have diversion money allocated for American Canyon, because while construction is going on, we're going to be the ones that are going to be most affected. So we're at the table there, making sure that we have both short-term solutions, midterm solutions, and long-term solutions. I think it's one of the great regional partnerships that has come about. And truly, when you look at a limited pot of money for these transportation projects, that's the only way we're actually going to get anything done, is by all of us being at the table and prioritizing that. And it's a great commitment by NVTA staff to get us there, to get us prepared, and to make sure that we are best able to advocate for Napa and the region as a whole. It is in our best interest that we make sure that we have the best designs going forward, that we are looking at Highway 37 as a multimodal corridor that can possibly have rail, that can have recreational access, that is already a part of Highway 37. Now, the next one, I'm going to just geek out for a second, because it's for those that are engineers, they're just going to love it. There you go. My first call of when this happened was to Jason Hawley, because I knew he would be excited for me. So there's these 2 documents that we need to do when we do public projects. One of them is CEQA, one of them is NEPA. NEPA is the federal equivalent of CEQA. Now, if you have federal money coming to you, either federal highway money, or if you have economic development money that you have on Green Island Road, you have to do both documents. And the reality is the overlap between the 2 is upwards about 90 to 98% the same thing. You just have to, pardon the layman's terms here, you just have to format it differently and use different words. But it's the same document, really. But you have to do it twice, and they're highly expensive documents to conduct. They require environmental studies, and they all have to be very specifically tailored, one for state law and one for federal law. Well, as I was in Washington, D.C., advocating for post-fire recovery funds, something was brought to my attention that we were given the opportunity from the federal government through the FAST Act. The FAST Act is the Transportation Authorization Bill, Fixing America's Surface Transportation is what it stands for. The FAST Act allowed us to have reciprocity between those 2 documents. But there was one big problem, and that was the statute of limitations. In California, the statute of limitations on CEQA is at 150 days. You've got to voice your objection, and we move forward, because the reality is those documents are substantial. They have turned over every leaf. So if your opportunity to raise an objection, 150 days, easy. Well, NEPA, the federal equivalent for reciprocity, was 2 years. And Caltrans said, we don't want to play that game. So we're not going to sponsor any project for reciprocity. 2 weeks ago, with some significant lobbying, our congressman, with the help of some congressmen on the other side of the aisle, have added a provision into the FAA authorization bill that would allow for California to exercise CEQA NEPA reciprocity with a 150-day statute of limitations. It's going to be a push to the end, especially given the politics in Washington, D.C., but the very fact that little Napa County was able to advocate all the way to the very top that this is important for our recovery as a disaster-prone county is extremely, it's a success for all of our staff. When I talked to my Public Works Director, Steve Lederer, I said, how many projects would benefit from this? And at that moment, my first trip to Washington, D.C., we counted 36. 36 projects would benefit at the county, and that's just the county of Napa. Every other jurisdiction. So when it comes down to it, if we're going to need that help and there's going to be a letter writing campaign, I'm going to turn to all of you. This means money back into our pockets here locally. If we're able to establish reciprocity, it means that we're going to be able to save millions of dollars to reinvest them again. As Director Tavares says, you got to keep that money locally. We got to create new projects with that. So that's one. It's not a win yet. It's a pat on the back. We've done good so far, and there's more to do. And we look forward to being able to bring that about here, not just for the county of Napa, but for the entire state of California. Thank you. And with that, I would like to introduce John Woodbury. John Woodbury is the general manager of the Napa Open Space District. The Open Space District is responsible for managing our parks, our open space. When you think about Napa County, you think about your luscious open spaces and your hillsides, and you look at the Soskull Ridge, and here locally we think about our own parks, our Parks Department and Newell. Well, in the county didn't used to have that. And when the county, through initiative, created the Open Space District, John Woodbury assumed that leadership role and has been responsible for seriously turning in a dime into $3. I don't know how he does it, but he finds money in the craziest of places, and with that, he is creating, with his board, additional open space here in Napa County.
Well, thank you. We need more than $3, though. So, actually, my name tag here says it's the Napa Valley Open Space District. It's actually not. It's the Napa County Regional Park and Open Space District. American Canyon is part of our jurisdiction, so we do like to serve this part of the county as well as East County as well as the Valley. So we have a very small, but I think I would consider very important part of the transportation picture, at least the fun part of it. I think it's pretty clear that there's no magic bullet with transportation. The problems are huge. And the solutions involve a combination of building highways, managing highways, dealing with land use, and also on the transportation side, dealing with both the motorized transportation but also the non-motorized transportation, whether it be pedestrians or bicyclists. It's the full package. And it's that last two pieces, the non-motorized bicycling and pedestrian part of it, that we have a role in serving. There are three regional trail systems that are relevant to this part of the county that we're involved with. One of them is the Vine Trail, and we're secondary to that. The Vine Trail Coalition is the leader on it, but that's a proposal to have a Class 1, i.e. grade separated, safe route from the Vallejo Ferry Terminal all the way to Calistoga. That's a huge spine. When it's done, it will be a really good commute route as well as recreational route. The second trail is the variously called the Napa River Trail locally, or the San Francisco Bay Trail in terms of a regional perspective. This is a proposal for a trail that goes around the entire Bay Area, close to the Bay Edge. It's about 550 miles proposed in total. About 300 and almost 400 miles are now in place. Napa has some of it. We have some of it still to do. In American Canyon has been a leader in doing this along its shoreline. We partner with the City of American Canyon to continue that trail. It goes up as far as just north of Green Island Road right now. We have been stuck for several years on closing that gap between Green Island Road and the Butler Bridge, which is Highway 29 overcrossing. Senator Dodd has recently weighed in on this, and I'm looking forward to his assistance on this one to get the state agencies to be more flexible and partner with on getting that section done. And then the final trail that I just mentioned is the Bay Area Ridge Trail. This is another regional trail proposal, which is an idea of circling the Bay Area following the ridge lines, and more of an open space kind of trail, not a paved trail in most cases. We have very little of the ridge trail done in Napa County. Skyline Park has a little tiny piece. We just completed acquisition of part of the old Kirkland Ranch, so that we now have the right-of-way to continue that trail all the way down to Highway 12. The next step is then to figure out how to connect that into American Canyon. Those three trail systems between them give us the ability to have a way to provide a full range of options for how people get around, either for commute purposes, but also just to have fun. On the commute side, when I first got into city planning 30 years ago, you could almost not even measure the percentage of trips that were made by bicycle or by pedestrians. It was insignificant in the big picture. That's been increasing a lot in recent years, partly because as a community, we've been designing our streets to be a little bit safer for bicyclists and pedestrians than we used to, but also because of, just in the last couple of years, things like e-bikes, e-scooters, they're just starting to appear here. You go to the inner part of the Bay Area, and they're everywhere. They're the future for a lot of commute purposes, as well as recreational purposes. So I think that that insignificant piece of the transportation picture is going to end up being a very significant, still minority piece of it, but it's a very significant part of the overall solution. So we're here to do that piece of it. There's a map in the back, if you want to look at, that shows the route of the Bay Trail proposal, and I think Philip can tell you more about the Vine Trail proposal in terms of its routing through American Canyon. That's what I have. Oh, and finally, Kate Miller, Executive Director of Napa Valley Transportation Authority.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Senator Dodd and your staff for inviting me to speak today. I don't know if I have to lean over this, if it's, can you hear me okay from here? So I work for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, and we're a joint powers authority that is made up of the 6 jurisdictions in Napa County, so Napa County and the 5 cities/town. On our board are representatives from each of those jurisdictions, elected officials. So we have the mayors and 2 supervisors and a council member from each representative jurisdiction. So in that capacity, in the Bay Area, there are 9 congestion management agencies, so each county has one, and the Napa Valley Transportation Authority serves in that role for Napa County. We also administer Measure T, which is the half-cent sales tax that we collect for rehabilitation of the roads that the jurisdictions actually deliver. We are also do all the countywide transportation planning. That's for all modes, highway, streets and roads, bikes, pedestrian, scooters, you name it. We include that in our plans. And I'm sure many of you have participated on some of our public meetings. We usually go around collecting comments and feedback from you on those plans. We also receive a lot of money from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is the regional planning body for distributing those funds to the jurisdictions for various improvements, usually federal and state funds we get from them. So we have this last year received 2 new types of funding. You've heard a lot about Senate Bill 1, which is gas tax. But we also had a bridge toll increase, Regional Measure 3. And while they may be incrementally painful for some of the members in this community to have to pay, it's going to be an incredible boon for the transportation improvements. It's money, we haven't received any new money for transportation since the early 90s, and it's a critical need for us to make any sort of improvements. We're just barely able to sustain maintenance on our transportation infrastructure. Playing a part in that is some of the things that we're changing. I know that Director Tavares mentioned that we're looking for efficiencies, and there's really a lot of new trends in transportation that we're really taking seriously. Adopting new technologies is one, which I believe City Manager Hawley mentioned. We're also looking at looking at operational improvements over capacity improvements. There is a sort of general acknowledge that creating new capacity in terms of widening the roadway is inducing demand and is costing a lot of money for very little benefit that may be for 5 to 7 years. So we're really looking at the cost-benefit aspect of the projects as we move forward, and that again continues to be an important thing given the limited fund sources that we have. So we are also really right now doing a lot of the studies that are part of our countywide transportation plan effort, and one of those studies is travel behavior study. And that allows us to take a look at where people are traveling from, where they are going to at a micro level, and provides a lot of good information for us to determine how to deploy some of or to develop and plan some of our transportation projects. And what we're realizing is that most of the people who live in Napa County commute out to higher paying jobs to pay for the cost of housing. And many of our workers are actually driving in from adjacent counties, and this is really contributing to our transportation problem. So there has been both a regional and statewide effort, as you probably have looked at your ballots, on how finding ways to build new housing and finding ways to build affordable housing so we can continue to sustain our quality of life. So some of the projects that we're working on, we do have a flyer. We also have 2 reader boards in the back. Big project that's moving quickly right now is Scottsville Junction. We are working with Caltrans on that project and looking at, instead of the flyover, which might be some tag words that you're familiar with, we're looking at a north-south overpass with roundabouts, either 1 or 2 roundabouts underneath. This will not only be more context sensitive for Napa and allow us to see the grape crusher in full view, because the prior project hindered that a little bit, but it will also allow for all modes of transportation users, pedestrians, bicycles, to be able to navigate the intersection, as well as be able to have turning movements in all directions. There was a thought at one point to cut off Sosco Ferry Road, which would have been sort of a crisis given we're looking at extending Devlin. So that is also being corrected by this project. We are hoping that the final environmental document will be circulated for your comment in April 2019, with the design phase beginning in the fall of 2019 and construction, fingers crossed, beginning around 2020, 2021. And just to Supervisor Ramos's point, part of the challenge that we have is that we're in the middle of doing 2 environmental documents, and it just takes a lot of time to complete that effort. We are also looking at improvements at Carneros. That would be a free right-hand turn, a free lane, northbound lane with extending right-hand turn pockets. Similar improvements at Jameson. And then we're working with Caltrans and American Canyon to define really what is the best bang for our buck down here. And we will be hoping to share some of that information with you over the next year so we can get your feedback. We're also working on express bus improvements. We did a plan for the first time ever. We operate the Vine Transit System as well as the American Canyon Shuttle and the other shuttles up Valley. And right now, our biggest challenge with express bus has to do with the highway infrastructure and not being able to actually serve bus riders on the corridor because there's no safe place to pick them up and drop them off. So we're making a number of improvements that we hope will eventually keep the buses on the actual corridor, which we think will greatly encourage use of those buses and reduce congestion. The other thing that we are planning on doing is more frequency on our Route 29 and introducing the 10X and the 11X. The 11X is the system that would operate down here. It would be more frequent and it would bypass stops. The Route 29 would no longer stop at the ferry, and instead the 11X and 11 would stop there more frequently. So we think those changes are really going to make a big improvement on running times, get you to where you need to go quicker, and hopefully help alleviate some of the traffic congestion. And I didn't want to leave without talking about travel demand, which is really one of the new transportation technologies that I think on a daily basis is changing. But NVTA is looking at 2 programs. We entered into an agreement with Ride Amigos, and we are about ready to probably enter into one with Loom. These are ride-sharing apps. They provide a platform and back-end administration for employers to provide commute benefits through, and also to reward employees for behavior. They allow you to actually take a look and see if there's any, it's kind of like a dating app, look to see whether there's somebody in your neighborhood who is going to the same place you are, or someone at your workplace, so that you can ride together and you don't have to do it every day. And that's the great thing about it, because okay, so I'm not thinking in the same context. I think the panel is up here. So, but the idea is, so a lot of the travel demand management tools we have are things like van share, right, where you're in a vehicle and you have this big commitment, financial commitment, and so you're obligated to use it every day. This allows you to just commute with somebody occasionally, and maybe 1 or 2 days a week you do it, and maybe 100,000 other people are doing the same thing. It really has the ability to incrementally reduce traffic. So we're not trying to fix the problem 100% with this, but what we're trying to do is make it a much more desirable tool, and alleviate traffic for everybody just a little bit. So let's see. So that our branding on our travel demand is V-Commute, so you can go to our website and look for that if you're interested in commuting, using alternative commuting. And we are involved in building the Vine Trail, but I think you've heard enough about that, and everybody knows what that is. It's our best feel-good project in the valley. So and I'll just there's a couple other flyers that we brought. If you want us to get more involved, we have a lot of committee openings. We encourage you to apply and get involved. And we also have a couple of handouts on some of the projects that we're working on in greater detail. And with that, I will conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the panel members. We're going to get into questions right now. If you have questions, fill out your card and staff will come around and pick them up. The first one, what improvements can be made in the city bus system for students K-12 and adult transition to be taught how to use the public transportation system? Kate?
So we implemented on-demand service with the shuttle, and what we're seeing is that we probably need to add another bus to make it a little bit easier for everybody to use. We currently have, I don't know if people in the audience have the Ride the Vine app on their phone, but it allows you to actually call the bus, and you can still use a telephone, but you can hail the bus using this app very much the same way you would do a Lyft or a Uber, and it will come pick you up and take you to your destination. During the school times, that it operates on fixed route to get kids to school, but we are recognizing that we don't have enough, and we also are going to put out another effort after we make some of our Vine changes to do some training with that. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Do you support the Bay Trail from the ferry terminal around White Slough to Napa? Who would be best to?
Well, we do.
Heck yes.
Is that the segment in Vallejo that they're talking about? The Bay Trail or the Vine Trail?
It says the Bay Trail from the ferry terminal around White Slough to Napa.
So in addition to, I mean, we're a general advocate for the Bay Trail, but then the city of American Canyon controls a part of the route, and the city of Vallejo controls a part of the route, and then a little bit's in the county as well. So there's a bunch of players involved.
Yeah, just to dovetail on that a little bit, there's a couple of segments in American Canyon. The southern segment has already gone through a design process and environmental review. We certified the CEQA document 2 or so years ago. So there's already conceptual designs in place, and it's more about looking for funding and identifying priorities for the different segments of the Bay Trail. And the northern segment, connecting north of American Canyon to the city of Napa is also a really huge priority, and we talked about that previously.
Great. How can I, as a resident, support your efforts to get funding to widen 29? This is the real long-term solution, not diverting 29 traffic to residential streets. Once done, it cannot be undone. Mark, you want to try that one?
Well, needless to say, we would support anyone who can get us funding for the 29 project. So I would agree. I think, I agree, the idea of transferring traffic through our local streets is a problem, and that's why I think that two parallel paths, Newell on the one hand and Wetlands Edge on the other, is a strategy. Now, I know there's some logistical issues with the Wetlands Edge strategy, and I, for one, kind of getting off the subject, I think it's something we need to focus on over the next 2 years, meeting with residents and other players to kind of work through those issues, because I think all the options are bad, frankly. So the best way to deal with something like that is to have all the players in one room and work through it. The good news is we have about 2 years before that's going to be an issue, so we have time to deal with it. But getting to the question of funding to widen 29, I would hopefully support it. I would pass it on to someone else other than, because I would just say, yes, of course. We would love to have that kind of money, but
I think one of the important things to add when we look at the proposed extension of connecting Newell up to South Kelly or Paoli or wherever, one first and then the other, and to look at the connection of Devlin and all the segmented parts, the American Canyon part and the county part. What we're looking at is not necessarily to create two more highways. That's actually not what we're doing. What we're creating is an emergency system that can benefit American Canyon in the event of a signal outage, which we've had. When we had a signal outage, it took over 2 hours to get to the city of Napa. Now think if we have a disaster. Think if we have a disaster. We have no way in or out from that segment from American Canyon if we have to go north. We have no way of people to come south. We need to connect those roadways to be able to have emergency routes. That's number one. The second one is to connect our industrial park, the airport industrial park, with the Green Island industrial area. Connecting those two industrial parks will take truck traffic off the road. Now, think about how many trucks do you pass on the road? If we can get them to connect to each other and then utilize South Kelly as their connection down to Highway 12 over to Highway 80 instead of driving through American Canyon, we have one, right? What we're really doing is, the important part is, when you look at transportation, and it was a hard thing for me to understand until I sat on this side, and that is that you need to keep regional traffic on regional roadways. That's actually where you move faster. Now, if try me out. Get on the highway as fast as you can instead of going the back roads, and it will work. That is exactly how our roadway systems are designed. And it takes all of us taking that responsibility and saying, I'm going to get on the regional roadway system because I'm going to take a regional trip, right? The city of American Canyon shouldn't have to be repaving our roads because you're taking a regional trip on a city road. Caltrans, with all due respect, Mr. Tavares should be paying that bill to be able to pave those roadway systems that are carrying those regional loads. So part of it is understanding the purpose why we want to create these additional roadway systems. It's because we don't have enough roadway systems for our own safety and for our own mobility. But the second part is to make that personal choice to stay on the regional roadway system and to encourage others to do the same. And I think if we approach it that way, we can actually make this model work in our benefit. Now, what can you do to get us Highway 29 money? Can I say it, Senator?
You can say anything you want.
There you go. Vote no on Prop 6. If our money goes away, if our SB1 money goes away, That is going to be a tremendous detriment to this county, to our projects, to our road maintenance. We're going to be having to diminish our road maintenance to be able to fund projects that are needed to manage our congestion that we have going on. So don't put that hard decision before your elected officials. We've already got a finite pot of money. That's how you can help us right now in the short term.
Well done. Okay, there is a Prop 6, which we've heard about just here, to repeal the gas tax, mostly due to the power it gives the legislators to bypass voters in raising taxes further whenever they choose. Do you believe voters should be bypassed for future tax increases? Well, I think that's probably a question I can handle. First of all, I don't think we're bypassing the voters. The voters, we have a state constitution. The state constitution says that on certain taxes, the state legislature can increase those taxes with a two-thirds majority vote of the California state legislature and the signature of the governor. So get this, you'd have to have two-thirds in the assembly of all the Republicans and Democrats vote for it, two-thirds of all in the Senate vote for it. Our gas tax was established at 18.1 cents approximately in 1992. And there's not one legislature ever since 1992. They all wanted more money for the roads and streets, but they were afraid and saying, wow, I might not get reelected because people be mad at me if I raise the gas tax. And, we saw in the legislature, I was there when we passed SB 1, and I voted for it, voted yes. And essentially, it took a long time for us to be able to get a proposal that we could all appreciate from the standpoint, even legislatively, let alone stakeholder groups throughout the state of California. And one of the things, we just can't pick a number in the air. What we did is we said, you know what, can you imagine in your families, for those of you who are old enough to remember back to 1991, if you were on a payroll making X amount of money, can you imagine having the same cost of living, same amount of revenue coming in today as you did in 1992, and you were expected to do exactly the same thing, pay all your bills? It's the same thing with any business. You couldn't operate a business today on the revenue you had in 1992 and be expected to do everything that you were expected to do in 1992. And so, we really felt like if we raised the gas tax by the consumer price index, so if we started the consumer price index from 1992 through today is 12 cents a gallon. Do the math on how many, how many miles a month that you drive. I really do believe it's de minimis. Now look, there are a lot of people that have to drive 200 or 300 miles a day or something like that. That's going to hit them harder. But the average person, it's not that much money. But nevertheless, we felt it was very important for us to pass it. And guess what? One of my colleagues in the California State Senate got recalled over this. A Republican area down in Orange County. And this is something that I really believe we did the right thing for the ratepayers, the people that are buying gas at the station, because you're spending way more money on tire repair, on alignment repair, the repairs to your cars, than you would ever spend, on gas. I know, Director, do you have the numbers, the averages?
$750 a year, or
So-
70, right?
Yeah, it's
700.
depending on where you live, it's in the neighborhood of $700 to $1,000.
For repairs to your car. And the gas tax, if you look at that on I think I had it on a monthly basis. I didn't think it was $10 a month or something like that. So I don't know, do you have any numbers on it?
I don't have the average.
I don't either, but.
You can work out just by doing the mileage on your car, how many miles to the gallon you get and what the cost of the gas is. It's very, very, very simple. So, and it was said earlier, let me tell you, the cities and counties will be hit disproportionately if this Measure 6 passes. I'm looking at the polling. I don't think it's going to pass, but it's very, very important, I think, to our economy, to our road systems, to road safety, as you've already heard tonight. So if anybody has further questions on that, we can deal with that in a minute. Specific to the Devlin Commerce Roads improvement, will or how the Wetlands Edge Drive be impacted?
Okay. As I said earlier, I do think it'll, we can say it won't, but the reality is it will. And that's why what I'm suggesting is, since we have at least a 2-year gap before it happens, to begin planning and anticipating. For me, I think the idea is to get a group of all the strategic stakeholders. So you'd get residents from Wetlands Edge, residents from elsewhere in the city, law enforcement, traffic engineers, planners, even the school district and the fire district, because if we're going to figure out how we deal with that, then we need all those stakeholders, because we may have to consider all the options. We may have to look at how we design the roads, not just with signage, but, open up the SB word, speed bumps, which I know the fire district is not a big fan of, but that's why I'm saying, make sure all the players are in the room, because like I said earlier, all the options frankly aren't that good. But it's important to work through all that, and because we do have a couple of years before anything happens, we have the time to plan it through and work it through. The ideal would be if we could build Newell overnight, and we can't. It's going to take time. And Devlin is the first thing that's going to be on board, and that is the first opportunity for some traffic relief. So, like I said, for me, it's a balancing act, because if we don't punch Devlin through from Green Island to Eucalyptus, you're going to see a lot of traffic build up on Green Island and 29. If you punch it through, you're going to see further cut-through traffic. But there's a school site that's being planned, and if that's built in about 2 years, you're going to see the same kind of traffic going on anyway. So for me, I think it's prudent that we try to plan and work through it now, because in about 2 years, you're going to have problems, no matter what we do or don't do. And if we don't plan and anticipate it, we're just not being responsible. So that's what I'm offering in the way of the solution.
Great. Next question. As we can see during the summer when traffic is lighter, schools contribute a lot to traffic. I know at Napa Valley College, we have many students, staff, and faculty that commute from outside of the county. What solutions do you see for this specific issue?
Well, I think in American Canyon specifically, we really need to focus on pedestrian and bicycle improvements and encourage kids, create a more safe infrastructure so that kids can get to school. And that has been generally the focus of redeveloping our roadways in Napa. So I think that's consistent with sort of the longer term plans. Also taking the bus would help. And I'll leave it with that. Maybe Jason has something to offer.
I was thinking, you want to chat a little bit about the work you've been doing with the college specifically?
Right. Well, we have been working with Napa Valley College on a PASS program so that we can reduce some of that congestion. This would be a pilot program. In order for it to go through, the students have to vote for it. It has to become part of their student fee to help subsidize it. But in partner with NVTA, we reduce the cost of the passes, and that would allow us to get students on the bus for a lot less money. And that student pass, I've already spoken to our partners in Solano County, would then work over in Solano County as well. So hopefully we can get that off the ground.
Anybody else? Okay. Asthma rates at 18% in the 94503 and 94589 American Canyon Vallejo area, where the state average is 14%. Why this health reality is not being considered as a driving point to address the congestion in American Canyon?
I don't know. I mean, I'll piggyback a little bit on what Kate said with that last question. Part of the vision for the highway includes non-motorized options. We've talked about the Vine Trail, but there also is a vision to have Class 1 facilities, sidewalks, bicycle lanes off of the highway, parallel on both sides to 29. And particularly for American Canyon residents, I think those will be heavily utilized because There's 300 days a year, more or less, that we have sunshine and walkable weather and bikeable weather, and it is only 1.75 miles from north to south. So we have employees here at City Hall who live in town, and they would walk or bike to work. They would walk or bike to home for lunch, walk or bike here to City Hall, and bike or walk home every day, given there were paths of travel, safe paths of travel on either side of the highway. So some of those asthma rates and other health concerns related to a reliance on motor vehicles as opposed to active transportation options can certainly be part of the equation.
Okay, before we get to the next question, we did a little math up here. If you get 30 miles a gallon in your car and you travel 12,000 miles a year, if you get 30 miles a gallon, the gas tax will cost you about $48 per year. So it's about $4 a month. Starbucks does better than that every day with you guys. If you have 20 miles a gallon, it's $72. So you can do the math. Maybe you drive more than that. If you double, your miles and your 24,000, it's 96 and 150. But when we talked about earlier, the cost difference of your car repairs and everything is $600-700 a month. So I think it's a good investment for all of us.
Mine's $148 a year.
Okay, is it possible to repeal the high-speed rail legislation and redirect those dollars, $100 billion, to other transportation projects? I could do that, but I'm going to give that to the director.
Governor Brown is on his.
Or would you rather not?
Yeah, I'd rather not.
Well, he'll have another boss in about 3 months, and he might be able to answer that question a little bit easier. But if you look at the two candidates that are running for the governor of the state of California, I think both of them are very, very concerned about the money that's being spent there. I will opine that most of the money that's being spent, the federal money that's being spent on that, I don't know if there's still a lot of that left, but the federal money that's being spent cannot be diverted back here for that, one. Two, these are cap and trade dollars that are going to the high-speed rail, and most certainly they cannot be redirected unless somebody does a net benefit study and shows that the carbon reduction of doing that would be substantial. So I guess no, the answer is they can't, not for state transportation. The cap and trade dollars have that nexus for climate reducing carbon in them. Happy to expound on that afterwards if somebody wants me to. Why all the new housing projects going on without the fix to Highway 29 traffic jams?
Sure, I can take a little bit of that. And as it relates at least to American Canyon, we are in American Canyon trying to be part of the sustainable community strategies that MTC has developed. We have what's known as a priority development area here in American Canyon. And the idea is to create a walkable neighborhood along the highway with those Class 1 trails that I mentioned before. And so part of the way that we can approve those developments is they're more dense and they have more people with walkable amenities. We have two projects that are one recently completed, another one under construction, that when those Class 1 lanes are connected on either side of the highway are very walkable to those lanes, and American Canyon will be a very walkable community. So we aren't planning any new housing projects that are the traditional single-family home, one house on 9,000 or 10,000 square foot lots with 3-car garages. There are no of those projects on the books here in American Canyon. All of the projects that we're looking at now are more dense, more walkable. We have a new project that the council will be considering tomorrow night, known as the Watson Ranch project. It is a very modern, a very urban type feel to it that has a mixed-use component. It will have retail and commercial and very walkable space next to it. It will have a school in the middle of it, all connected by trails, large sections of the Vine Trail. We'll be connecting all these pieces. And so the visions that we have for these developments as you see them are to be connected by other modes of transportation and to really, to really enhance those other modes of transportation. So that's really where our focus is.
Great. Next question, where can we get access to the study showing what traffic local roads can support versus what 29 can support after its expansion? Data will help with decisions.
Sure.
You're an engineer.
Yeah, well, Tony's an engineer too, but I might be a little more familiar with the Highway 29 corridor specifically. Yeah, I think one of the things, and I was going to answer this to one of the questions earlier, one of the things that we need to be sure that we're thinking about as we talk about capacity on the highway, and we talk about capacity of the parallel roads, is to understand where the capacity constraints are on the highway. We've talked a while about widening of the highway, but really what that is surrogate for is improving capacity. And where those constraints aren't actually the straight lines in between the intersections. Our focus now is more about the operational improvements at those traffic signals, but the straight lines in between those signals doesn't necessarily need to be 3 or 4 lanes or any sort of width. It's really at the intersections where turn lanes and smart technology and active timing plans, those are where the capacity constraints are. If you think about a pipeline and you got a bunch of bends in the pipeline, it's not the straight part of the pipeline where things are constrained. It's all the elbows and the valves. And so it's looking at the operational improvements at those intersections. So as we study which locations are what the side streets or the local streets can support, again, we're not looking at what these can support and what those can support in making data-driven decisions. What we're working on are what are the operational improvements at the intersections. We've done some very extensive computer modeling of Highway 29 using some very sophisticated software, and you can see at the individual intersections where the buildup starts to occur, and we're pretty confident by changing some of those timing plans and making some of those operational improvements, there can be capacity there. But at the same time, we know connectivity on the outside, like Councilmember Joseph has mentioned before with Devlin Road and Newell Drive, is needed as those auxiliary improvements. We know you're not going to build our way out of capacity constraints on the highway. We're not going to go to 8 lanes or 10 lanes or 12 lanes. But those capacity enhancements at the intersections, at those nodes, are where the focus area is. And lastly, dovetailing that with the Class 1 lanes that I mentioned before. Newell Drive will also have the Class 1 bicycle lanes along it. Actually, it's the Vine Trail, it's a little bit to the east of it. But Devlin Road will have Class 1 lanes along it as well, along with the highway. So it's not just the vehicle modes that we're thinking of. We're thinking about all of those modes of transportation.
Well, and just in terms of the data being available, we're winding up our travel behavior study, and that should be done, Danielle, at the end of the year? Yeah? Spring, early spring, okay. So, and then just there's standard figures for lane capacity. So on highways, it's about 1,900 cars per hour. So we're, most of the times of the day, we're a little bit over that. So, but I think that it's been shown that operational improvements are really much better investment than full-blown capacity projects. Not to mention that there really is no money available to us other than local money, and certainly we don't have $30 or $40 million to invest in capacity. So,
One of the things that we got to look to the future on is, this is not on the transportation plan for Napa County, not on the state's radar yet, but I've been very impressed with Sonoma County and Marin County with what they've done with the smart rail. And I'll tell you, it is really working. It's taking traffic off the road, and it's something that we're going to be looking at very carefully, because if it can work there and their commuters are taking it, why couldn't we have a rail line that went from at least downtown Napa, maybe later St. Helena, all the way down to the Vallejo Ferry? Start getting our tourists, instead of clogging our roads, workers to be able to come to one central area and be able to take local transportation to and from work, to and from, tourist destinations. So it's going to be a long-term. We're always going to be looking for solutions that really make some sense.
Well,
Go ahead.
No, well, just in that vein, the SMART system, the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit, is doing a feasibility study right now to bring the SMART train east that Belle, you mentioned. But we're also, that's a great vision. But short term, we're looking at microtransit, which is like a chariot and scoop, specific to moving visitors up here, but day visitors. Most of our visitors are day visitors from San Francisco, Alameda, and Santa Clara County. So we're looking at that as well, which I think will help significantly on the heavy days of the week, which for us is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Well, I feel like the great Karnak from Remember Johnny Carson. Because Fran Lemos, I was channeling her, and this is the question that she asked, and we've already answered the question.
There we go. Excellent.
Thank you, Fran. Any other questions?
Oh, just,
The question was, Napa Junction was always home to trains. Why don't we use this system? To build roads is expensive, fixing the tracks could be less expensive, and she's spot on.
I will, if I can add, actually, I will be traveling to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this weekend to attend a conference. Railvolution, MTC and ABAG are paying to send me, so not your county dollars, are paying to send me to learn more about the interrelationship of rail, not just for logistical purposes, but also for as a multimodal component for transportation. So I'm scheduled to take some really cool workshops to learn a little bit about more how people and rail can coexist, because you're right, we used to do that quite well.
Any other questions? It looks like we don't have any other questions. We'll be around if people want to have one-on-ones. Really appreciate you all being here, appreciate the panel. These things don't happen on their own. I'd like to thank my staff, Angie, Alex, Paul, and Tom, for being here tonight and getting this all set up. I'd like to thank the City of American Canyon for extending their hospitality, for having the event here. Dan McElhaney, who's the Deputy Director. We have people come from all over the Bay Area, Sacramento. John Blenko from the California Highway Patrol. We have our Police Chief, Oscar Ortiz. We have the Chief Sergeant for the California State Senate and his trusted right-hand man. We have Jody Barnett, the Chief, and Kevin Johnson, who is here and always has our back. We appreciate that very, very much. I hope I didn't forget anybody, but most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. Good night. Good job. God, it's good. Have you ever been to a railroad?